I'm so excited to talk to you all about the program and sort of where we're at, where we've been, where we're going, and get into it with you. I'm gonna just start by talking about what sort of like the foundations of the program. So maybe like what's still the same for those of you who have been through the program. I'll talk a little bit about some learnings from our core last year, and then how we're putting those into practice in the year ahead with our new core. Um, so I think first and foremost, um, saying that EarthCorps has been, and will continue to be an experiential education training program. We learn by doing and getting in there and getting a little bit of context, a little bit of the how, and then trying things out. And then after we do the thing, stopping, thinking about what that experience was like, pulling out relevant nuggets, and then trying it all again, right? So this is still at the heart of who we are. And this is really, again, like mirrored by our service learning model, right? For those of you who maybe are less familiar with EarthCorps, we are an AmeriCorps program, which very much embraces the idea of service learning, which is very parallel to experiential education, right? Where you're learning the thing, you're meeting a community need, and then you're reflecting on that experience so that you can go out and do it again, maybe differently, deeper, better in a new way. The key thing also that we practice at EarthCorps is reflection. And one thing that we have refined over the years is ensuring that our reflection happens internally, right? You know, we love a good journal. We love sitting at the coffee shop, staring into the distance, you know, thinking about all of our deep inner thoughts. And we also recognize that that kind of reflection, while important, can reinforce beliefs that we already had, right? We're sort of talking in an echo chamber, right? And then it's important to reflect, share perspectives, think empathetically about other perspectives of the same experience, right? And that's how one event can take on a new meaning and become a learning experience, and actually in our groups create a new shared meaning, right? It's how we challenge our beliefs, right? To understand how someone else experienced the exact same thing, but in a completely different way. So we do this by reflecting individually and then also reflecting as a group, making sure that we're bringing in some of those assumptions that we may have about what happened, or ideas of power and privilege that may have been at play. So we're ensuring that we're not just reflecting in our journals, but we're reflecting as a group. Our program goals remain the same. We're really exploring our mission by diving into what it means to build healthy habitats, support young leaders, and engage strong communities. So our core member programming looks, come on, friend. Whoa. So our flagship program, the program that we've been running for 30 plus years, is a program that provides structure for crews. So it's a team-based program that goes out and implements projects on the land. And this is really meant to be like a buffet, a sampler platter, if you will, of restoration, exposing the people in the program to different methodologies, different landscapes, different agencies, land management agencies, so that upon completion of the program, folks better understand what they might want to pursue more deeply, but also maybe how they show up and work in a team best. And this is really foundational to when we want to show up for a movement or a cause that we believe in, informs how we can show up to that cause to be the most helpful, right? We are also have a program around community specialists. And for some of you and who have engaged in different ways, this has really evolved over the years. During the pandemic, our volunteer specialist program, which really ran from 2010 to about 2020, it shut down because we weren't working with volunteers, right? Nobody was, it was COVID. And so we had an opportunity in the year or so that that program was dormant to rebuild it. And this year, we'll have 4 volunteer specialists out leading volunteers in the community, learning how to engage youth and the public and working on the land. Then we are in the process of bringing on a farm specialist that will be focused primarily on supporting work at Wakalima Farm, which is a amazing organization that EarthCorps has been building a deep partnership with over the last several years to support immigrant farmers, working land, building culturally significant food, or growing culturally significant foods. And then another specialist working with Bridging Cultural Gaps, which is an organization supporting youth development and a lot of work around like computer and technology, getting them engaged in environmental work and helping to bring an environmental element to their programming as well. So exciting things happening there, shifting and changing. And then our international program, also a program that went to sleep for a little bit during the during COVID. Visas were hard to come by. You couldn't get a visa during COVID, but last year we ran our first cohort of 6 people, and we did some experiments for what that could look like. And right now we're just in the process of onboarding 6 more international participants. We just sent out offers to a group of people last week, and they'll be joining us from June through November this year. It will look similar to the program as it has run in the past, where folks on a J1 visa will come to Seattle and work alongside our U.S. Corps members in the field for several months. And what is going to a little bit different is that these Corps members will spend about 4 months in the field working alongside the U.S. members, as I mentioned. But then in mid-September or so, we're actually going to pull them from the field, and they'll have a couple months to work on a capstone project. This capstone project will be a mix of meeting an EarthCorps organizational need, something that our staff are currently pursuing or can support in pursuit. And then the international members' professional development needs, their interests. So last year was the first year that we ran this, and we had Corps members develop projects around circular economy and storytelling and building out a Corps member handbook for their home organization. We had a deep reflection on what the program meant to them and the growth that they had. So really exciting stuff, really excited to see where that takes us in this year as we gear up for that time ahead. I'm just going to kind of quickly move through this next little bit. We also did just wrap up a program in December, and at the end of each program year, we want to hear from that Corps what was meaningful for them. Is the program still impactful? So to ensure that we're still headed in the right direction and providing a transformational experience. And we evaluate on three things, again: the leadership, the community, and the habitat aspect. And we're really looking at how can people articulate their own definition of leadership? do people understand leadership frameworks? Do they understand their own leadership strengths? And so rating that pre and post program. And in this last year, people reported an increase in skills by 1 to 2 points. So a nice jump on a scale of 1 to 5, and shared some thoughts around leadership, being that seeing that leadership is a complex and variable and depends on circumstances and the people involved, and the past year being an opportunity to broaden comfort level in that. For habitat, we're looking at a pre and post on how people understand ecological restoration, modeling pace, quality, and quantity, understanding the knowledge and skills of the environmental sector, and experiencing the restoration industry. And we saw a really a bigger, more marked increase here of a jump from 2 to 3 points. And for those of you who have been through the program, or for anybody who has planted a plant, this will ring true to you too, that, planting is a magical experience, right? And putting something in the ground, that instant fruit of that work, continues to be an experience that members treasure. And finally, community, looking at intentional action to foster and build understanding personal impact, team elements, and what it takes to work towards equitable society. And again, we saw a marked increase here in people's skills. And this one, understanding that we can have more of an impact in this, working towards an equitable society than originally imagined, is something that I think it's good to be reminded of when the problems of the world feel big, which they often do, recognizing that those actions that we take daily do matter. And I think finally, recognizing that this program continues to foster sense of place, sense of person, and understand value, right, of people coming together, and what we can do when we put our minds to it. So that's where the program has been in the year past.
Elizabeth, while we're talking about program in the year past, I want to say thanks to everyone who threw a question in the chat or in the Q&A function. Before we jump into the next thing, can I ask you can you a couple of the audience's cues, please?
I would love to.
Awesome. First is those capstone projects. They sound awesome. And someone was curious if the core members, the US-based core members also get to do a capstone project.
Yes. They do. It's a little bit less intensive, but at the end of the program, so within the program, we have workshop days, regular workshop days that happen every other week, and they tackle topics like land management and leadership and climate anxiety and resilience in the year ahead, working for social change. And towards the end of the program, we dedicate 3 to 4 of those workshop sessions to the whole core working on capstone projects. So typically we have 5 to 6 of those that members get to choose from. These are projects that are proposed either by our community partners or by land management agencies that we work with often. Sometimes they're a project that the land manager wants to do but hasn't had time to think about, or would like to pitch to their boss, but again, hasn't had time to really tackle. And so the core comes together around these projects. Some past ones have been thinking about building amphibian riparian habitat barrier between farm fields and water bodies out at Oxbow Farm and Carnation. Working with volunteers and youth in parks or at schools. And then we've had projects routing new trail, proposing upgrade to trail. Many of these in the recent past at Mill Creek Canyon Park down in Kent, where our Corps members have spent a good amount of time. So that's an example. And then at the end of those 3 sessions of developing a plan, developing a presentation, there's a pitch that members do to the rest of the Corps and ideally the community, sharing what their idea is and getting questions. So yes, it happens for the US members as well.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Regarding the reflection opportunity, someone said, I love it. I love reflecting. But could you share some examples of when that reflection is, when does that happen? Is that during the work itself? Is that at workshop days? When does that typically pop up during the core experience?
Totally. I would say most often it happens during workshop days. We work to carve out that space. And so that would be one way that we've done this in the past is to actually set aside an hour during a workshop day and give crews time to think about, let's think back over the last 2 weeks that we've had. What is one experience that really stands out for us as significant? And let's put it through this framework that we have that really has me think, what was my experience of that? What might someone else's experience on the crew of that have been? How do things like power and privilege come in? And then go through a process of sharing out to within the crew to understand the fullness of that. And create something new at the end. But this also might be a question like on Friday we have a workshop coming up that asks, who has been an impactful leader in your life and how did they influence you? And giving people time to think about that individually and then share out their answers in small groups or sometimes a large group to be able to compare the different ways that people can lead and have influenced, whether or not that's something that we would traditionally think of as a leader. So I think that it happens in both of those ways. And then at the end of every day, we fill out a work log that essentially gathers the data of what we did out there in the field. Some of you have definitely filled those out. And there are questions on there that ask, the highs and lows of the day. And there's definitely good time in the trucks to hash things out on the way back. And I think this is also one of those places where reflection isn't comfortable for everyone. Some people love it, and some people are like, I can't, my brain is done. I'm done. And so navigating the varying levels of people's engagement in that is always really fascinating and reflecting on why. Reflecting on why reflection might be hard is important work too. So hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Elizabeth. If any of you continue to have questions, feel free to throw those in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll interrupt Elizabeth a little bit later with the ones that pop through.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, so I think some things that we're really thinking about when we are putting together this program year ahead, how we build healthy communication and feedback loops. I think that this is something that people talk a lot when they talk about leadership or when they talk about growing is how do we talk to each other and how do we give constructive feedback, but it's hard, right? To go into that critical space sometimes. Hard to both give that and hard to receive it. And so while that's something that is encouraged at EarthCorps, we really understand that there needs to be both structural ways there needs to be structural ways put into that's happening. And for a long time, we have done evaluations at EarthCorps, but trying to evolve that to the 2.0 of that version to get feedback flowing more regularly and across teams and between the staff and the Corps at EarthCorps. Corps members were excited about the community work that EarthCorps is doing, connecting and getting restoration work to community organizations and community work. I mentioned the work we're doing at Wacolium Farm and the work we're doing with Bridging Cultural Gaps. And Corps members just want more of that, which has been something that Corps members have been asking for, and we continue to work to get more and more and more. So good to know that that's still the direction that we want to go, and good to know that we still have more work to do. Corps members appreciated affinity spaces. So we hold affinity space as part of our programming. We hold a BIPOC affinity space and a queer affinity space, which means that this is a place where people with that shared identity can come together and build relationship and support. And last year, we held those groups, and we got some feedback that they needed a little bit more structure and support. And so we're working that into our 2024 ahead. And then also continuing to think about how we do anti-racist work at EarthCorps. In the past, we have had specific workshop days where we talk about racism, we talk about oppression, we talk about allyship, and we want to keep those days. Those are important, but how are we creating this to be a more regular conversation space? And I'll share more about that when I talk about this year and what we're trying. And then again, continued career development opportunities, more and more skills for summing up like what the EarthCorps experience is. So this brings us to 2024. In 2024, as it says here on this lovely, beautiful slide, this is our first cohort that is close to, if not exceeding, the minimum wage in Seattle, which is no small minimum wage. Still doesn't go as far as we would like for it to. It's an expensive place, but yes, our crew members are making $17 an hour, and our second year leader positions are at 19, with an additional $430 housing stipend. And this funding is really coming through a grant that we have with AmeriCorps. And after years of advocating with AmeriCorps that Corps member stipends needed to increase, they hear it, they've worked to make it happen, and this is the result. The state of Washington also is contributing funds through the Washington Climate Corps Network, which is new this year. It's launched through the governor's office and is about funding climate work in the state, funding core programs and connecting them, and thinking about what more we can be doing as we work toward climate resilience. As I mentioned before, we're growing the community specialist team. We still have the position of volunteer specialist, which we have had for several many years, but adding more focused specialist positions that are embedded in community organizations is something new that we're really embracing this year ahead. And our cohort had a wait list this year, which this is a large success. And we haven't had a significant wait list in 5 years, and really getting to that more living wage, I think, has been the thing that has really helped us do that. Any questions about that before I go on? Are we good?
Yeah, there was a question if any of our community connections include partnerships with tribal nations.
Yes, and those connections are deep and have existed for many years. Particularly the tribes in the Skagit Valley, north of Washington. We work with several different groups, Skagit Fisheries Enhancement Group being one of them, that brings in both brings in tribal representatives and tribal perspectives, and have done several projects over the years. We don't have anything particularly new in the hopper for partnership wise for 2024, but we are looking at how we build out the sense of place and the story of the people who have been on this land and stewarded this land since time immemorial, for our core members who are living and working on this land, understanding that that they are part of that story, and that story has been erased and needs to be recovered. So yeah, hopefully that answers that on some level.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Do you have
Yeah.
any recommendations for resources or books that have historically informed the anti-racism curriculum at EarthCorps?
Yes. So books that are informing it currently. So you want to talk about Race by Ijeoma Oluo. Right now, Four Pivots by Sean Ginwright, and Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown are three books that are influencing our work. Yes, and I'm happy to give more. I've got a little bit of like, I'm a little nervous. Names sometimes escape my brain, but I'm happy. Please reach out to me after this. You can send me an email, Elizabeth@earthcore.org, and I can send you lists of what we're reading and looking at. Me and White Supremacy, that has been an extremely powerful text.
Thanks.
So many. Oh my gosh. Now it's like my brain is splitting and I'm having to turn them off. Yes.
Awesome. That's it for the questions for now.
Okay. Um, so for 2024 programming, you all have had a little bit of time with the slide as I've been talking, but yeah, we're, as I said, expanding community connections through specialized positions, really also looking to bring community leaders in to workshop days. So that might be looking at those big voices, some of those that I just mentioned, people that are speaking at a national or a global level about the concepts that we're talking about. So that maybe that's through readings, maybe that's through like so much of the content that you can find on the internet that is brilliant, and people really sharing their forward thinking and deep thinking thoughts. But equally important is getting those more local leaders in. So folks that are doing work on land and with people regionally, including alumni. Like the best is when we get an alumni member that is a few years out and is like out there doing the thing, and bringing them back to share their story. So we're working to have an alumni speaker at most, if not all, of our workshop days moving forward into this year, so that we can hear some stories from the field and get some of that good experience. Around affinity spaces, looking at making sure that there is a good outflow of information from that space, so that if there are ideas or needs, that's being communicated, and we're having that conversation at a bigger level sooner. And so what that looks like right now is that staff that are a part of that affinity identity are checking in at the beginning and the end of that space to bring out any relevant information. Those spaces meet 6 times will meet 6 times within the program as part of those workshop days, and are encouraged to meet outside of those workshop days as well. And then these spaces will be working with and informing what we talk about in the anti-racist working group. And the whole Corps is involved in that space. It also meets 6 times throughout the year, in addition to the workshop topics that we will cover around this topic. And that space will start by talking about how we create a brave space to talk about racism and becoming working to be anti-racist, and then we'll evolve based on the readings that we're doing and the conversation that the Corps is needing to have. And then finally, career development. We are piloting 3 internal certificates at EarthCorps. So basically, these are ways of packaging the experience that Corps members have into something that it is easy to put on a resume. So an example here would be something like a certificate in logistics and operations. And that certificate would be things like a certified EarthCorps driver with this many hours behind the wheel, a small engines training, this many hours doing small engines repair, this many hours operating small engines, and building out those certificates. So at the end, members are able to say like, this is what I practiced, and this is the certificate that I earned through that. And then continuing to build those healthy communication and feedback loops. So this is probably our 4th year having an issues and ideas committee. And this committee consists of myself and other program and field staff who meet with Corps member elected representatives monthly just to talk about like what's going on and to have that direct line so that there is less telephone and more direct connection. We have a program for our Corps members to become EarthCorps board fellows. Members apply to that, and we have 1 crew member, 1 leadership cohort or sort of 2nd year Corps member position, and then 1 alumni position. And those members attend board meetings, are on board committees, and really get to see the inner workings of what how a board works, but more specifically what the EarthCorps board is talking about. We have a curriculum committee that informs our workshop curriculum that meets monthly to give input on how workshop days are going and the content that they're covering. We have a fun committee because we're fun, and we recognize that fun is key to building relationships and celebrating. And then we'll continue to have one-on-one check-ins with Corps members and evaluations, and these bigger discussions that are at the heart of our programming around shared values, how we communicate with conflict and deliver through conflict and deliver feedback. So yeah, there's big stuff happening and stuff that is still like looking into the future. We're still looking at getting accredited certifications for the Corps through academic institutions, and have a couple grants in percolation that would actually fund that partnership and that reality. So fingers crossed. Looking at mentoring, really excited to have Brandon on board as the alumni coordinator to think about how we're bringing alumni experience and expertise in for our current Corps. And then continuing right now, AmeriCorps has also heard that, you know, we need AmeriCorps programming to be real career ready skills. And so they are just throwing a bunch of resources at us right now for members to use as they go through the program. And have some meetings next week to help explore what some of those resources are and how we would use them. So exciting things coming our way. And that's it. That's what I got. So yeah, if there are any other questions that are out there that y'all have, I'd love to talk about it. And if this isn't your forum, please reach out to me. You know, I said my email once, I'll say it again. Just to talk about it. I'd love to hear how this sits and what you're thinking. Oh, you're muted, Brandon.
Did the pandemic even happen? I'm right there with you, Elizabeth. One question in the chat. is what do non-affinity group identifying folks do while the affinity groups meet? Are
Yeah.
the affinity groups, are those folks missing out on any content? Can you kind of talk through how that works?
Yeah, totally. This has been such an interesting thing, nut to crack. We do asynchronous learning in those times. Or maybe there are special projects that need to be done. Paula, our logistics manager, always has about 14 things that need to happen. But we really we take care that those affinity spaces are not missing content. The asynchronous learning that might happen. So maybe an asynchronous learning idea might be like read this article and have some time to reflect on that, or go do a plant walk, or go do some bird ID, or go check out this restoration site and write down your observations, right? That there are things that can be repeated out in the field as needed. But that's no content, no facilitated content is missed. Great question. Still working it out too. So
We'll give it another 15 seconds for someone to frantically type their last question into the chat. Um, here's one. The three pillars, how did they come to
yeah.
be?
Oh, what a great question. This is ancient EarthCorps lore we're getting into. And I will accredit them to Pipo Bui, who was our development manager at EarthCorps for a while, our grants manager for a while, and development um, teams. They have a way of packaging and thinking about information, and that so the lore goes as people was really trying to think about like the depth of what EarthCorps was trying to do, the impact on the land, the impact with people, and she was able to really distill it down to these three pillars, these three legs on a stool. So the story goes, where um, leaders, we can't build the leaders without the habitat or the community, the classroom, right? The community is what knits together the people in the land, right? And the habitat is where it all happens, right? And so each of these pieces are inextricably linked in what we're doing. And so really that resonated so deeply with the folks on staff that is woven into just about everything that we do. And we're asking, okay, where are we ticking these three boxes? I think as the question that we're asking ourselves now is really making sure that there's a fourth leg on that stool around environmental justice. And where is justice work coming in, and how are we serving that cause?
As someone who sits on the development team at EarthCorps and did not know that that was partially the brainchild of someone who sat on the development team, I feel very proud right now. But thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your time telling us more about what the core program looks like in 2024. Thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. It was a real pleasure to have you. Thank you for your questions. As Elizabeth said, we'd love to continue hearing from you. If you have feedback or ideas or more questions, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. I also in the chat just dropped a link to a link tree that includes a couple of different ways that you can get involved at EarthCorps, both the core program and beyond. Things like signing up for our snail mail swap, where we around the globe, our EarthCorps supporters are sending some postcards to each other. We have opportunities to set up chats with me, the alumni manager. We have a couple of ways to just learn a little bit more about what we've been up to, things like our strategic plan or some of our recent videos. There are a bunch of great options to learn a little more or dig a little deeper with your involvement or knowledge of EarthCorps. We really appreciate all of you so much for being here, and we will talk to you soon.
Yay, thank you.